Liberalism is a form of cognitive dissonance where people ignore facts and reality to deny them their basic truths. By definition, Maurice Cranston says, a liberal is a man who believes in liberty. In two ways, liberals accord liberty primacy as a political value. Liberals have typically maintained that humans are naturally in a state of perfect freedom to order their actions as they think fit, without asking leave or depending on the will of any other man. Mill argued that the burden of proof is supposed to be with those who are against liberty, who contend for any restriction or prohibition. The a priori assumption is in favor of freedom. Recent liberal thinkers such as Joel Feinberg, Stanley Bann, and John Rawls agree. This might be called the fundamental liberal principle. Freedom is normatively basic, and so the burden of justification is on those who would use coercion to limit freedom. It follows from this that political authority and law must be justified, as they limit the liberty of citizens. Consequently, a central question of liberal political theory is whether political authority can be justified, and if so, how. For this reason, social contract theory, as developed by Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Immanuel Kant. In this regards, we find that much of the Muslim world has been besieged or conquered by liberalism. Liberalism being a creed which removes religious restrictions and sovereign laws and calls all people to freedom. This freedom is the freedom to do as your nafs desires and is in direct opposition to Islam. It is for this very reason that the goal of the liberal reformers is to remove religion from state, and then remove religion from society altogether is taking place in certain Western European countries, mainly France, where this ideology was born. When one looks into the history of liberal imperial colonialism, we find that in every case they considered themselves bringing freedom, such as in recent times, for example in the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, or across North Africa. The call has always been the same freedom. So, what is meant by this freedom in reality? This is the call of their atheistic ideology which they forcefully impose across the world. Ideology based upon atheism and the following of your own desires. So the Muslim, being the one who has submit or surrendered his or her will to Allah alone, can never be a liberal. Such thing as a liberal Muslim cannot exist, as the ideology of liberalism is opposite of Islam. Whereas the Muslim says we hear and we obey, the liberal is in opposition and rejection to this, as the liberal his or her desires are their God. To this Allah mentions in the Quran, have you seen him who takes his own lust as his God? And Allah, knowing him as such, left him astray and sealed his hearing and his heart, and put a cover on his sight, who then will guide him after Allah. Will you not then remember? In this verse Allah shows clearly how they are lost and misguided atheists, and he makes clear the shirk they commit, making their own lusts and desires rival Allah. Then Allah goes on to speak about their arguments when you bring them to the root of liberalism, the rejection of Allah and the hereafter altogether. And they say, there is nothing but our life of this world. We die and we live, and nothing destroys us except Ad-Dar. And they have no knowledge of it, they only conjecture. And when our clear verses are recited to them, their argument is no other than that they say, bring back our dead fathers, if you are truthful. Then Allah mentions how most of them are misguided without knowledge. Say to them, Allah gives you life, then causes you to die, then he will assemble you on the day of resurrection, about which there is no doubt. But most of mankind know not. From the reasons that the Muslim can never be a liberal is that he is one who is a servant of Allah, not free to do as he pleases, but a slave and servant of Allah. While the liberal atheist is a slave and servant of his own lusts and desires, a captive of his desires. And Allah mentions his sovereignty and the weak state of these people in front of him. And to Allah belongs the kingdom of the heavens and the earth. And on the day that the hour will be established, on that day the followers of falsehood shall lose, and you will see each nation humbled to their knees, each nation will be called to its record. This day you shall be recompensed for what you used to do. Thus liberalism is no more than a weak satanic Masonic atheist call to the worship of one's own desires, a call which is in opposition to Islam. Once we come to realize the ideology of liberalism and what it stands upon, as well as its historic acts of hatred against Islam and its people up onto our time today, then we can wake up and see what is happening around us. The elephant in the room, the sickness plaguing our nations. We can see this today across the Muslim world as well as facing the Muslims living in the West, what this liberalism calls to the making of everything haram halal. Iblis is not afraid of socialism, liberalism, capitalism, or any other ism of the world. The only ideology he is afraid of is Islam. He fears the sleeping ummah if it wakes up and starts working towards change.